Good evening. It is Monday, the 13th of January, 2025. It is 8:30 p.m. UK time, and this is part of my journey, episode 48. It's my mental health talk show. We've been doing this since I think it was the 1st of March, 2021. I've had lots of amazing guests already on the show, some well-known DJs, some well-known producers, some less well-known, but everyone's been very open and honest in talking about their experiences. And today I've got a very special guest. He was the headliner at our We Love 45s event in Cambridge in September of last year, and he's headlining another show that we're doing, Funk Up the Courtroom, and that is taking place in March. He's a producer, he's an amazing DJ, he's part of Smoove Turrell, he does amazing remixes. There's going to be so much to talk about, and we're going to try and cram it all into an hour. It is the one, the only Smoove. How you doing?
Hello, nice to be here.
But I've got to say, first of all, a massive thank you, because you were one of the first DJs who did a mix for 45 Day back in 2020.
Really? I didn't know
that was the first year. We had 50 DJs in total, and you were one of the first ones. So I think that's when I had people like you getting involved. I had Mark Hype getting involved. I was like, okay, maybe I'm onto something here. Maybe the 45s culture can sort of take things a bit further. But all my guests that I get on the show, I like to find out who instilled this musical passion in them from an early age. So for you, who was it who first got you into music?
Ultimately, if I'm going to be honest, it has to come from dance, like actually dancing. I did a little bit of robotics when I was very, very young. I must have seen it on TV. I think it was the Esther Ranson show, That's Life. Saw some robotics and I was trying to do that. And very quickly, it was breakdance and body popping. And then the movies started coming out, like Breakdance Beat Street, so forth. I was just obsessed with dancing. So I think it was the electronic music that was really inspiring me initially. This is before I'd heard any rap or anything like that. I mean, there was elements of rap in those kind of stuff. Yeah, that was initially the first thing that set me off, was being able to dance. And I think that's a good thing, because it sort of cemented like me understanding of what music was. Because if I could dance to it, then it felt more powerful,
Obviously, this is pre-internet, pre-YouTube, pre-things like that. So where
Pre-electricity,
were you getting access to the music at that sort of age, and where were you dancing? Was it at specific clubs? Was it at school? Where was it?
Yeah, school. I got permission from the teacher. There was like two other friends at school. Not many people were doing it. In our lunch hour, we used to go into the school hall and try and learn ourselves the moves. But there was no videos, there was nothing like that. There was no books even. I think there was a record and it had a diagram of how to breakdance on, and we were like, that was useless. So we just kind of made stuff up and fumbled our way through. And you would see something on Top of the Pops, or you would see a music video that had nothing to do with breakdance or hip hop culture or anything. And it had a tiny element of breakdancing, like Freeze, IOU. They were on BMXs, but there was a little bit of breakdancing. It wasn't very good, but anything used to like massively excite you. Do you know what I mean? And that was the thing. It was, you were like almost starved of this thing that you were like intrigued about.
It's just you and your mates sort of messing about.
Yeah.
Did that ever get to the stage where you're sort of performing in front of the school?
Yeah, kind of by accident. I was doing robotics in the class, and a lot of people were watching me through the window. In part of the act, I vaguely remembered going like that, like sticking my fingers up, like to everybody. And then through the gap of everyone disappearing, I saw the headmaster staring at me, and I was like, "Oh no, I've been called here." But he came in and he went, "I love what you were doing, apart from the last bit." And he said, "Can we put that into a school play somehow?" And I went like, and I was really shy as a kid, by the way. I had a severe stammer, so I never really spoke much, believe it or not. I was really like, "Oh, I'm not sure about this." And he went, "No, it'll be fine. You can wear like whatever you want to wear. You can hide behind a mask and we'll make you a costume and all that." I think they had a play already written at school, and then they invented this part where this spacecraft landed, or I don't know what it was, and I went out into the
Amazing.
audience, scared the shit out of everybody, because they had like just a spotlight on me and like a smoke machine, and it was, looking back, probably really effective, because you couldn't see me, I had like wires and all sorts of things like strapped all over me, and nobody knew who it was, you know what I mean? So that was the first thing that like led me down this path. So I loved that. And then a few years later, at the higher school I was at, there was a kid I met who was very tall, and he was doing robotics. And these girls had seen me doing robotics at this under 18s nightclub, and they used to take me there, and they were like, "Oh, you've got to come here." So he heard about me, so we teamed up, and we decided to do this performance together. And I remember the music, he picked it. It was Heaven 17. It was this weird, like, electronic sort of, and I've only just recently found the song, which was great. But anyway, me and him did this performance, and that was kind of like the start and then the end of it. That was it, you know what I mean? Around about the same time as that, Electro series was coming out. So the street sounds electro, which everybody always says that's what changed their life. True in the UK. You were starved and you found these albums for 50p in Woolworths, and they were just gold. You know what I mean? All of the electros, all of the street sound stuff, like all of it. You know, the hip hop series, the boogie stuff, like all of the soul and funk. It was just absolutely Morgan Carr, and I can't thank him enough. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's amazing that you say that, because so many of my guests do come on and talk about those albums. Now, it's probably to do with age as well. We're probably all
Yeah.
about the same sort of age. But it is amazing the influence those albums had, you know,
It,
and they still sound, a lot of them still sound fresh now. You know, that's the thing. They're well
it,
produced.
yeah. It was the equivalent of like kind of like a YouTube channel. You know what I mean? It was really important. Like,
So in terms of actual buying records, then, because obviously you've talked about how you got into music because of the breaking, and you sort of had your first band with this other guy, sort of doing this thing. When did it come that you actually started buying and perhaps collecting these records?
my dad had a lot of records. That was predominantly rock stuff. I say rock in the loose sense, you know, that it's such a wide term anyway. But he had very good stuff. But I didn't realize it at the time. Obviously, I was young. Stuff like Hendrix, Van Morrison. He had Ray Charles, Nina Simone, Joe Cocker. He was a big fan of stuff like that. But he used to play them at 4 o'clock in the morning, which was really annoying. You know what I mean? I didn't really get into that. I was more fascinated by the record player he had, watching it go around. That used to like just mesmerize me completely. I was like, wow. So when I finally got given a record player, I remember being given from my cousin a couple of records. One of them was Imagination. It's just an illusion.
Yeah.
And my sister played that to death, and it was a great record. But it was more so about the turntable than the actual records. My sister tried everything, right? She tried like ballet, like gave up on most of it, and all these different lessons that she went to. One of them was a disco class that she went to. I didn't do this, obviously. I remember going to the record shop with my mum and my sister, and me mum said to the guy behind the counter, "We're looking for disco music. My daughter's learning disco dancing. What can you recommend?" And he sold her this album. And we got home, and my sister went, "I don't like it, it's shit," and went upstairs, and that was it. And I went, "I think it's great," and I kept playing it. Turns out it was funkadelic, and I didn't know at the time. It was One Nation Under a Groove album. You know what I mean? And I was just like, when I realised, like, it was about 4 or 5 years later, I went, "What was that album that my mum bought?" I ran downstairs and opened it, looked at the sleeve, and went, "Oh my god, look what it is!"
Incredible.
So
Incredible.
actually, the first record I properly bought, which was in a cheap bin, was Masquerade. They were called Masquerade. They were on Street Sounds, and they did a version of One Nation Under a Groove. It was like a mega mix of like all these different P-Funk songs, and that's how I then put two and two together and went, "I've heard this before," but it was the George Clinton album. Yeah.
We'll get to mega mixes later, because obviously that's something that you are quite well renowned for. But it's interesting again that you're sort of listening to these mega mixes from quite early doors. You know, I mean, what sort of age was that you were picking that up?
Well, radio was a big influence. It was really difficult where I lived in Sunderland. There was very very few radio stations. Even now, there's still no radio stations. You know, it's like it's terrible, really. London, you get the pirates and all that. You get nothing up here. Pirates are a thing of the past now, but you've got the internet. But back then, it was like people used to pass tapes through the post. It was crazy. But there was certain shows I would hear locally up here. There was like Ian Hughes' show, and I'm actually friends with him now. There was some more iconic stuff, like obviously John Peel, his show, Great London Radio. You would hear these songs and tape them on your ghetto blaster, and then
Yeah.
that's how you had it. You know what I mean? And that was a big thing. And never for years, never did I think of ever going to a record shop and saying, "Have you got this record?" and taking the tape in. Do you know what I mean? So that was so frustrating, not ever knowing what the song was. You know what I mean? If you missed the guy saying it, that was it. You know, you just stuck with the tape.
Yeah, but again, it's good that music was getting to you, and that was the
Yeah.
way it was. Like you said, it's before the internet, and it's similar to me. I think when I was probably 14, 15, I was able to get my radio, and it had a really long antenna all the
Yeah.
way around, and I could just about get Kiss FM in London. So I was hearing like Colin Dale and Colin Faber and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But again, that was the only way I could access that music, and similarly for you, you know, that at that stage, that's the only way you can access it. You know, we live in this world where you can access anything you want
Yeah.
whenever you want, pretty much. Back then, you had to go searching for the music, didn't
I
you?
think I think there's a lot to be said to actually being starved of the thing that you're after. It makes it a lot more like desirable. You know, that there's definitely some truth in that. Although it was very very frustrating at the time, not being able to get a hold of stuff. I always feel like I could have skipped a few years and advanced much quicker had I been able to get hold of these songs and had the knowledge that I was trying to get. Do you know what I mean?
Talking about being starved of what you want, that's what makes us collectors, isn't it? A record, that record that we haven't got, or that holy
Yeah,
grail,
yeah,
and the one we can't
yeah.
afford, or you can't find a mint
Well,
copy of it or whatever.
it's similar to equipment in
Yeah.
studios. I've always believed that the least amount of equipment you've got, I've never really had much equipment. The power of a laptop now is just unconceivable. When I was 14, like that, I could do everything in a laptop, and I
Yeah.
mean, like produce it to the quality that I'm getting at. It's just insane. It's like, obviously, I'm quite old in the tooth now, but if I'd had this when I was 14, oh my god, you know. But would it have hindered? Would it have stopped me creativity? Because you can. Do you know what I mean? It's the desire and not being able to do it, and that, like, how am I gonna do this? That was the thing. I was always thinking, I'm gonna make a record. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna make a record out of other records. That was my first thing.
What age was that then that you first decided that you were going to perhaps
Probably
produce?
probably like 15, 16.
Okay.
Yeah, quite late.
And obviously at that stage, obviously you've talked about not laptops not existing in the way that they do now. What sort of equipment did you manage to get your hands on initially to start doing that process?
Started working with a guy in a studio in Sunderland, and then another guy as well. He had a sampler. First guy had a sampler in a keyboard, so it was restricted how much you could sample. And I learned a lot from those two guys, a hell of a lot. I saw music in a slightly different way to how they were. So, for example, if they were like saying, "Oh, if I loop it from bar one and the end of the bar, and that's the loop," but you hear the voice on the one. He says, so you can't loop that because it's got the voice under. And I go, well, just take it from the snare drum after, and then let it fall onto the last snare. And he went like, oh my God, yeah, you can do it. And I was like, that's really obvious, but not so obvious to someone who's never done it before. You know what I mean? So that was another great thing about working with other people. You're learning. The point I'm trying to make is, to go back on it, I never had the patience to learn how to use the equipment. So I would always sit over someone's shoulder and say, can you sample this? And it was so frustrating. And eventually I had to make that jump and do it myself, because I always believed I couldn't do it. I always thought I'm not clever enough to learn how to do this. You know what I mean? It's just like learning to talk or learning to write. Once you do it, that's it. It's in you forever.
Just taking this for an example, before the pandemic, I hadn't streamed, we hadn't done talk shows, we hadn't done anything like that. And it's just little baby steps, isn't it? You
Yeah,
work and you learn
yeah.
little things. And it's the same for production and DJing and everything musical, isn't it?
But
You've
I
got to
hate
start
technology.
somewhere.
I hate technology because it always goes wrong. And if you try to update something or you try to change something, it cocks up the thing that you've got working. So I'm really reluctant to sort of change
Yeah.
anything. If it works, I just work with it, and that's it. I'm using a really old version of Cubase, and I just like it because it works. And everyone says, "Why are you still you could do this and this and this?" And I'm like, "No, I just want to do the work. I don't want to like find out, oh, where's that button gone now? They've moved it. Like that really pisses me off."
Yeah, but it's also you get into a method of working, don't you? And
Yeah,
the time you can spend learning some new
exactly.
features is
Yeah.
time you could be making music. And if the music's coming out and you're happy with what you're producing, then you don't need to move to anything
There's a
else, do
lot
you?
of like geeky people I've met who are like tech freaks, and they spend so much time building up more and more and more stuff, and I've never heard them finish a track. So that's
Yeah,
kind of the opposite end of the world of like where I'm at.
exactly. I'm going to say hello to Matteo. He's coming on the show in a couple of weeks, and he's saying never update Mac OS.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
My Mac's really old as well.
yeah.
It's like 2015 model, and I'm running OS X on it. I think in a 10.5.5. And so websites won't even work on this now. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not bothered because I just want to do my music on it. Do you know what I mean? It's a powerful beast, and I am going to have to upgrade, but I just can't be bothered.
Especially when you're producing or being an artist or anything, it's trying to not be distracted.
Yeah,
And obviously, if, like you say, you're running an old computer and websites and things like that, you're not going to be distracted by, oh, I'm just going to check this email, or I'm just going to go and look at this website, or all
yeah,
of that. Because then when you're working, you're working. We sort of jumped ahead a little bit, but
yeah.
in terms of the sort of music stuff, you put up something interesting today, and you laughed earlier when I put it in, but I thought, we've got to use this on the show. But you posted this.
Yeah,
And it says, Smoove gets in the groove. DJ Smoove has proved he is king of the discs after winning the Marlowe's Night Spot Disc Jockey of the Year award. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
I never wanted to be a DJ, right? I wanted some decks. I wanted to make music with turntables because I'd seen scratching, I'd seen people looping, and I knew what loops were. So I wanted to make music. I wanted to sample. I wanted to do some stuff with that. But I did not want to be a DJ in a club. That's the last thing I ever thought I would be. Thankfully, I did end up as a DJ because I could pay the way to make a living while I did music. So it was great. Actually, so I can't knock it. But a few friends of mine said, you should go into this DJ competition. I was no way in hell going to this thing. And they were ringing my house, the landline, because we didn't have mobiles. And they were ringing and ringing and ringing. And I said, Dad, don't answer the phone. And he answered the phone. And he was talking to my friends. And I was like, I'm not going. I'm not. He said, get in the car now, get some records. I'm driving you down. They're all waiting for you. And I went, oh, no. So I went into the competition. And while I was there, I was thinking, well, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to really pull this out of the bag if I'm gonna do it. So I started cutting up, scratching, looping, throwing records at people, and I started rapping, beatboxing. I did. I think I was breakdancing at one point. I did everything I could do in 10 minutes, and I won. I won £200, which back then in 1989 was a hell of a lot of money. You know what I mean? Not enough to buy a set of decks though. And then I got a residency, which I had for like, I don't know, 6 weeks. And then they realised the music I was playing wasn't working in that bar. But I'm glad my friends put me in it because it made me realise that I can do something. You know what I mean? if you put your mind to it, really, you know.
You then got that residency for a bit. Did you enjoy the sort of regularity of sort of playing out?
No, I very quickly realised I hate residencies. I can't stand residencies. I think I did one in Revolution, which was really good money, every year for 7 years, and I hated it, absolutely hated it. But I liked doing Poonanar. I used to do a few different Poonanars around the country, and
Yeah.
they were monthly residencies. That was different, you see. It didn't feel like it was repeating. I love doing one-offs and jumping all over the place. I hate being in the same place every week. I can't stand it.
Well, it's what keeps you fresh, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons of what I do with We Love 45. I'm trying to take it to as many cities and many countries as possible. To try and put on a party again. It's coming
Yeah.
back to that whole. It's not just another night at a club, or it's just not another night at the bar. There's actually something special about whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the moving around and playing different places is another aspect of that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I was fortunate that a guy came over from Germany to see me at one of my album launches. I'm obviously jumping ahead, but he was called Frank Pieska, and he said, "I'm starting an agency. Do you want to come in with me? I'll get you some gigs." I went, "Yeah, absolutely." And I spent like 15 years going around Germany, France, and wherever else. And it was like that changed my life. You know what I mean? So it was all going in the right direction even before I got to that point. You know what I mean?
Well, you've talked about your first album. Let's talk about that then. How did that come about, and what was the sort of response to that?
The very first album was on Acid Jazz, my solo album that was. I'd met Eddie Pillar in a club DJing at a residence night I had in Newcastle, and we used to bring up Eddie Pillar and a few different artists like Andy Smith, Bentley Rhythm Ace, Mr. Scruff, Mark Ray, really top quality DJs. And they would be on like a monthly residency as well, so they would like keep coming back. We'd forged really good relationships with these people. So Eddie Pillar heard my demo and eventually signed it, and then released the album in 2005. That came out. That went down really well. I mean, I was on Acid Jazz at that time, was a very small label. But it was the first time I'd really understood what an album was, and the whole like ethos of like making an album, like a body, like a book, like a whole, all the chapters and what it is and the vision and everything. And once I learned that sort of formula or methodology of making an album, realized I could just repeat that. And then I kept doing that, and then I met John Turrell, and we formed Smoove Turrell. I already knew how to make an album, or what it needed to be, but it was more about it. They get harder every time you do them because you always want to better what you've done. Do you know what I mean? Like, it shouldn't get harder; it should be easier. But I suppose
I guess it's the pressure, isn't it? It's the
yeah,
pressure of what's they going to do next. This comes back to the sort of mental health element, isn't it? You don't want to put something out that's going to perhaps flop, or people might say is not as good as its last stuff, and then you think your career's. It's a lot
yeah.
of pressure, isn't it? Once you have success.
The record companies are always onto you saying like, come on, we can't leave it too long, you've got to put something out here, you got to, just you must have some B-sides or something, you must have. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to take 3 years. I don't care if people forget my name or who I am or where I am. I want the product to be right. Do you know what I mean? I do take a long time to do an album, like roughly it takes. We have a year off. We always have a complete, like we do nothing as Smoove and Turrell anyway. You know, we tour all the time. We're always performing, but writing, we just like, we need to sort of, it's not something that we've like sat down and, well, this is what we need to do. We just naturally always fall into this sort of absence of writing and then building up this energy and it's about to happen again. You know what I mean? It's like, I can feel it. You can almost
Yeah.
sense it coming,
It's
you
the
know?
inspiration.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Plump Mantra. Tell us more about Ultra Groove. I wonder why. It's a cracking track. James from
So
Darlington.
that's a good question because I did skip forward there. Like when you asked me what my first release was, I actually got signed as Ultra Groove, as he rightly says. That was the name of the act that we had, which was three members, Tubes, Pete, and myself. That was signed to Big Life Records, which was a big deal at the time. That was 1990 when we got signed with them. So we were label mates with Della Soul, Lisa Stansfield, and The Orb. I mean, and Naughty by Nature and Digital Underground. So we were like, this is unbelievable. But
Amazing.
it was very short lived. We never got the sample clearance. The records got melted down, and we've only got three in existence. Sort of cobbled this video together to explain what that was. So that was me rapping on that one, actually.
That must have been heartbreaking having to have the records melted.
Yeah, it was a Boss Skaggs sample, but there was loads of other samples that we kind of hadn't even looked at. But back then, sampling wasn't a thing. So De La Soul was in trouble at that time with their second album, De La Soul is Dead. I remember they wouldn't even play us the album. Half the album never came out because there was so many full of samples. There was a big learning curve there with sampling laws, and you know it's still going on now, but got worse, and rightly so. You know, like people need pain for if you're going to steal someone's music, for want of a better word. But that was at the same time as I was signed with another record label, another project called Ashbrook All Stars, and that was in Sunderland. We tried to make Ashbrook sound like it was a city, and that was on East West Records. That went to number 16 in the dance chart. But that was kind of a throwaway song. It was like all samples of the Average White Band, the Rolling Stones, which we didn't clear, and Steel Eye, Span. So yeah, that was a strange record. Half of that crew was Ultra Groove, and the other half was ASK. They were from Sunderland as well. They were signed to MCA Records, which was a big deal. They ended up with another project called Opus 3 that had a number 2 hit.
Yeah.
It's a Find It. So
Yeah.
that was the crew that we were all working with in 1990. That's what was happening then.
Amazing. So yeah, thanks for that question, Plump Mantra. That's a good story. You've mentioned John. So how did you guys connect? Because obviously a lot of people know you as Smoove as your sort of individual, but they also know you as part of the group and that. So tell us about that.
I was working with lots of different singers and lots of different musicians on each project I was doing, and live stuff as well. So after that Ultra Groove period, that was very short lived, and then I found myself not really in a creative zone anymore. So I went to university to study sculpture. So I did a degree in that for about 4 years. And while I was at uni, there was a woman there I used to talk to a lot called Nicola. She was very arty, very, very creative. She started going out with this guy called John, and she told me about him. She says, "Oh, my husband is a singer," because she got married to him. And I was like, "All right, can he record some demos at yours?" So he came round, and that's how I met John. So I was recording his demos, and he was in this outfit called the Stevies at the time. It was him and another guy called Alan. And I said, "God, you got a great voice. Do you want to guest on one of my tracks?" So I pulled out some tracks, and I realized he could write as it was playing. And like before he even got the end, he wrote all of the words. It was just like, this is him. This is amazing. This guy's super talented, and he doesn't even know it. And he'd never really been in bands or anything. He never recorded anything before in his life. He'd been to music college and that, but like nothing had really happened. He was from a folk sort of soul rock background, really, but he listened to great music. Like all of his family's like really into like the same stuff as my dad were. You know what I mean? All of that great stuff like Hendrix, you know, all of it. We very quickly realized, let's do this album. So the first album came out on Jalapeno. It was called Antique Soul, and it was 2009. I think we finished it in 2008. But I got it signed within an hour of sending it off. It was crazy. I gave it to my agent, who I mentioned earlier, Frank. So I wanted him to send it out rather than me send it out. And we sent it to like 10 different labels. And there was a few in Germany, there's one in Italy. Jalapeno was in the UK. And I was aware of Jalapeno because of Ski Whiff. You know, It was like really cool label. And Trevor rang me, and he basically sort of said to me, "You're a DJ, aren't you?" I says, "Yeah." And he goes, I'll get you a DJ gig. You can come down and sign the contract. I went, all right, then cool.
Amazing.
And that was it. And it's been great since because they just give us total freedom of what we want to do. You just can't complain like something like that, you know?
Which comes back to what you were saying earlier on about not having that pressure and obviously having as much time as you need to put out a decent product. Because, like you said earlier, it is like a book, isn't it? You know, if you're going to write a book, you're not just going to do a throwaway, B-side sort of book, are you? You want to put something out that people are going to, just listen to constantly.
Yeah, I mean, an album is always going to have a couple of like, well, that's a bit of an album filler, if for want of a better word. You look back. I think we've done 150 songs of Smoove Turrell. That's a lot of songs. There'd be a few duffs in there. You know what I mean? But on every album, I think we're on 8 albums now. So on every album, there's at least 2 or 3 absolute bangers. So, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're going to sort of jump to the future at the moment, but writing albums and putting albums out now, obviously we've got the younger generation who are into their Spotify and they're listening to a track here, a track there, and that. Has that affected anything in terms of how you put music out? Have you got like less tracks on albums than you did when you first started?
I'm still a massive firm believer in the album, as in the album is in the product. Like I always envisaged what the vinyl is, how it plays, the track listing. I don't really care about Spotify. I do care because you have to do it. You know what I mean? I'm not ignorant. My real belief and my passion is about the real physical product. I'm not snobby against DJs who use Tractor or Serato or digital files or anything like that. I believe a DJ should use whatever tools he wants. You know what I mean? Just because I'm like obsessed with vinyl doesn't mean to say everybody else has to be. Do you know what I mean? A DJ can use sync if they want as well. You don't. It doesn't make you a better DJ or a worse DJ if you use sync, because what you're playing ultimately is the definitive thing. That's what matters. It's what you're playing. It's not how you're playing it
Yeah.
or the medium that you're playing it on. But yeah.
Rolling Adam, we have a question. He would like to know about the multi-track reworks. What's the process and inspiration behind these? And also, why are they so expensive to buy? He saw Muro play one of them the other day too. There's about 4 questions in one there, Rolling Adam, but let's start with the process and the inspiration.
It all comes down to I am absolutely obsessed with drum breaks. Like that's my entire life is just looking for drum breaks. Like I am like surrounded by drums, making drums, breathing drums, feeling drums. It's all I think about when I go to sleep. It's crazy. So multi-tracks was sort of at first a delve into trying to find the breaks that weren't available on the record because you could isolate the parts that were there. But finding those files are really difficult, and it takes a lot of patience and a lot of time, and sometimes a lot of money as well, because you've got to like pay for some of these privileged sites, and they're in the dark web or wherever from Russia, and it's a nightmare to find them, honestly. And they appear, then they disappear, you know. And there's a lot of stuff out there that you can use, but just because it's a multi-track or a stem, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to remix it, because sometimes you can't do anything with it. You know, just because you've got Hall and Oates track doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make it better. So that was the thing when it started. It was about finding the drums. And then the first one I did, I think, was Shaka Khan, Clouds. And I was just messing about with that. And then I moved all the intro. I changed all the intro and I took the stabs and had this really interesting sort of build up. And I was thinking, oh, this would be great as a DJ thing. I was thinking more like that. And then I did it and I finished it to play on the radio. So I do a radio show. I did that and I got such a good reaction. I did a few more and then I started finishing them quick because I knew the radio show was coming up. So that was a great thing to sort of push you on. Oh, finish this mix so you can play something new on the radio that no one's got. So that was another great thing, you know, like it sort of pushed me on. And then the next thing I know, I'm on volume 9. It's like, how the hell did that happen? Do you know what I mean? So to answer the question, what did he ask? Why are they so expensive as well?
Yeah, go on. You answer that, because we were talking even before the show about how records have just got really expensive to buy now.
I don't sell them for that price. What you got to remember is I sell them at wholesale price, like half that price of what they're actually online. That's what people don't understand. And then I've got to pay VAT, and then you've got the manufacturing costs are really, really expensive. They've just like literally tripled. So that's the problem with them, and that's why they're expensive. And then the sites are just putting the double bit on, you know, because they've got more overheads. They've got, you know, so I mean, I know you can get cheaper 12s. I'm not denying that, but I put my price at the wholesale price what I sell them at. I always believe that, look, if you don't want to pay the price, it's fine, you know, like just don't buy it. You know, I've always believed that if I really want a record and it's 30 quid, I'm gonna buy it if I really want it, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. We were talking about this just before
Absolutely,
this show as well. Both guilty of buying stuff, and I think most record collectors or record DJs will be. And I think the last thing he mentioned, Rolling Adam, was he saw Muro played one of them the other day too. Now, obviously, these are 12s, so
yeah,
that is another whole cost over and above
yeah.
45s, because obviously you've got whack records and you put out 45s in there. So, is the difference in costs
Much,
huge in
yeah.
12s?
It's like almost double the price. It's crazy. It's
Yeah,
really expensive. There's no labels on them. They would cost more if I had labels on the artwork and stuff. So like hand stamping them takes ages as well.
yeah.
And I've got to do the post. All of it's got to come here, which is what some of these are. And then I've got to hand stamp them and then send them all the way back to London. Whereas I could just do a label and go straight to the distribution. Do you know what I mean? So there's all of that ball ache that has to be factored in as well.
It's something you enjoy and it's a passion, and if you didn't enjoy it, then you wouldn't do it.
And there's something cool about hand stamping. Like everyone's kind of individual and
Yeah.
messy and runny, and I quite like that. That sort of handmade element.
Let's talk a little bit about Whack Records then. So when did you first set up the label, and what was the purpose of it?
Well, I made a track a long time ago. It was around 2008 or something like that. I'd sampled Diana Ross, "You Can't Hurry Love." I loved the bass line. I always loved the bass line. I thought one day I'm gonna do something with that. And I was programming a beat over it, so the bass line was going boom, 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 and I programmed the beat going boom, 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 boom. And my friend was there, and we were going out that night. And I remember vividly, he went to get ready, and he came back in the room, and I'd moved up the snare, so it went boom, 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 boom. And he literally jumped up, was going like, "Oh my god!" And his towel dropped off, and he had nothing on. I was like, "Oh no!" And he was like so excited. He goes, "What is this?" And I went, I don't know. And he went, "Oh, we've got to find an acapella." So we started pulling out all the records, and we're supposed to be going out. And we pulled out a few acapellas, spun a few over, and he passed his big L, and I spun it over, and we looked at each other like that and went, "Oh my god!" And that was it. That was like the next day. I woke up and I could see the logo in my mind, and I rang my friend. I went, "I want to start a record label." And he went, "Well, right, I'll help you. I'll find a pressing plant. I'll find distribution, and we'll do it. What's the track you've got?" And I played him, and he went, "Oh my god!" And that was it. And I took the mini disc first to Germany. I used to have a mini disc player, plugged it into the mixer in the clubs, and I played it every gig I played, and the room went absolutely mental. And I knew I have to release this on vinyl. That was the start of Whack Records, basically.
Amazing. And that was that a 45, the original one, or
No, it was a
that was the
12.
12 to start, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were EPs, so I'd try and squeeze a few tracks on, like 4 tracks or 3 tracks.
Rolling Adam's got another question. I think he's going back to the multi-track works. Are any of those going to be on 45?
No, because the whole point in the multi-track is that it's extended, like, and the
Yep.
breakdowns, and you've got these long, beautiful moments that would kill a dance floor. So there's something about the 45. 45s generally always just get to the point. The only thing that would be different on the 45 maybe is the extended intro, and that's about it. I have thought about it, and one or two of them could be edited down, but I think it would sort of ruin the point in what it is.
Ruin the concept, maybe. Okay, you sort of touched on 45s, and obviously we're on a 45 day. We're talking about 45s in general. What is it about them for you that makes them? You said that they get right to the point, but what else is it about them that you enjoy?
You can get a lot of records in a small space. I remember traveling loads with big 12s, and it was bloody heavy and awkward, and I don't know. There's just something fun about them. Sort of like they are a bit fiddly to mix with. Very awkward to scratch with. You've got to use them slip mats. You can't live without them now.
Yeah, you can't get them. You can't.
I
You
know.
can't get these anymore.
I would die if I lost mine.
I think Mojax was saying, I think it's something to do with the material. It's difficult to get the actual material, but they're
Right.
working on a new version, but it's not out yet. So maybe. I mean, there's the cutting kittens, but they're much thinner.
Yeah,
But these particular ones are just,
yeah,
I don't know, they're just amazing.
I've just always loved that. I mean, you can't see I've got like a massive shelf here of sevens, and then at the back of the room behind me, behind all them records there, that's the whole wall from ceiling
Wow.
is all sevens as well. So there's a lot of sevens in here.
They're really like, and it's oh, go on.
Show you, look, there's
Wow.
seven wall, and then that's my other vinyl wall.
I mean, it's a lot of records anyway. We were talking again before the show, weren't we? Because you were saying that you've got some stacks that you need to get out of the studio so that you can buy more records. And I was telling you that I'm doing dry vinyl January again, but it's a constant problem though, isn't it? You know, you need to make
Yeah.
space for new records. We can't stop buying records, can we?
Moving house, I've moved at least 7, 8 times, and it gets worse every time. I mean, I
Yeah.
never want to move again because the amount of records in here is ridiculous. It would fill a lorry. In fact, it did when we moved. The actual truck, the massive truck, it was entirely full of records on the first delivery, and then they came back for everything else, like the sofas, the washing machine, the bed, the actual things that you live with.
The important things first, records,
Yeah,
obviously.
absolutely. So, but I purposely got this place, and I had the walls built with the shelves inbuilt right to the top, all the way around. So, it's a nice space to be in because it's dead in here, like because it's insulated by vinyl.
Yeah, yeah, the vinyl's insulated because that is this your your home studio as well? So this is where you produce as well. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's great for recording.
okay, let's sort of move forward a bit. We've talked a bit about your DJ career. We've talked about sort of Smoove Turrell and doing the gigs, and we always end up talking about the pandemic because obviously for a lot of us, it's how we even got to this stage in terms of sort of broadcasting and being on Twitch. But what were you doing just before the pandemic? Were you sort of DJing and touring at that stage?
Yeah, well, Smoove Turrell constantly tour. We're basically away like nearly every weekend, so there's a lot going on with that. It just hit so quick, and then I woke up one day and I went, I think my career's finished. That's it. And I sort of accepted it. It was a bit of a shock, obviously, and I just thought, well, I'll go back to sculpture. I'll do some stuff online. I don't know. It was a dark time for everyone because nobody knew what was going to happen or if life was ever going to return. Never mind being creative. There was that, and then we sort of jumped through a few hoops, did some live broadcasts with the live band, and that was good fun. And then we started doing the radio show, which was really good fun. People still come up to us now at the gigs and say, "Wow, you saved my life." I mean, I was almost crying at one point. We did this gig online, and people were like writing notes in, and they were like sitting there dancing, right, eating their food and their drink, watching the gig, and then they sent all their photos in because I said send your photos in, so they did, and we never got them till the next day. But people had properly dressed up, and they weren't even leaving the house, but they felt like they were having a party. You know what I mean? And it was like, wow, that's amazing. So I just look at the pandemic in a positive way. I never look at it like a negative way. I just think it was a great time for humanity to check itself, and because I knew fine well people would just very quickly forget and become arseholes again. Do you know what I mean? And not appreciate the fact that they can go out or they can do whatever they want now. You know what I mean? So it was a great check for everyone, but a lot of people were very depressed as well. It was a very dark time for many people. Personally, I didn't really suffer that bad because I'm always in a creative spot. When I used to travel a lot in the airport, and I used to go to the airport early, and if I had coffee, Wi-Fi, my laptop, and my headphones, it was a state of mind. You know what I mean? Everything's there. The only thing you're missing is to see your family. Do you know what I mean? But like, really, it's a state of mind. So I think you can trick your mind for so long anyway.
I think it was great in one sense because as creators, it made us rethink what do we do? Do you just carry on? And I think, like you said, the fact that you were able to do live streams, which you probably would never have done if it wasn't for the pandemic. The radio show, again, that might have happened, but maybe not in the same way. So, like you say, it's all positive. And like I say, even just this show, this came out of the pandemic and people talking about what was going on. But it was a great level. And like you say, we were all in it together at that point. We're all stuck indoors. You couldn't go anywhere. And life has sort of moved on. And to a large extent, is hospitality still struggling? Are they still trying to catch up?
I think hospitality's had the worst of it, really. I think hospitality isn't so much struggling because of the pandemic. I think it's struggling because of the, call it what you want, financial problems that everyone's got, bills, the lot. So I don't think anyone's got money anymore, and people are worried. It's cold, especially when it's cold. People will always want to party, even when they've got no money, because we've all partied when we've had no money before. Do you know what I mean? There's always a way to party. But can they afford to spend 20 quid on a gig, 20 quid taxi, 20 quid on a few drinks? Like, possibly they can't. Do you know what I mean? That's ultimately. So ticket sales are definitely hammered now compared to what they used to be. People are not as frivolous.
And I think the other thing is before people would perhaps go to two or three festivals in a year, whereas
Yeah.
now I think it's like, right, we're just going to go for one. And obviously that's bad for all the festivals, hence why so many festivals are sort of shutting down. But as well as an artist getting booked, I mean, I assume that's having a knock on effect for you as well, isn't it, in terms of gigs?
Yes and no. We do our own shows. We've got an agency as well, and then we do some festivals. We've done so many gigs and so many festivals. We almost get to the point now where we're like, you know what? If they're not going to pay us something that's worth actually going there for, then
Yeah.
we're not going to do it. You know what I mean? Like years ago, you would just jump at any chance. You're like, oh, you could play this festival down here, and oh yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go. Or they're only going to pay you like some fuel money. That's it. Oh yeah, let's go, let's go. But we've got a band that we have to hire. We hire a van, we hire a driver, we pay for the fuel, we buy the hotels. We can't just do it like for the cost that like sometimes what they're offering. It's impossible, and sometimes you just got to go. No, sorry, I can't do it. Like, don't like shoot people down and go like, oh, it's disgraceful that they're only offering this money, or the everyone knows about the Glastonbury thing. They don't pay most of the artists. It's just a fact. So it's like if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Don't go online and complain and knock everyone else. You know what I mean? Because there's always someone's going to do it for like peanuts. Do you know what I mean? Always.
Yeah, and I guess bands that are starting up, like you say, as a young band or a young artist, you are just going to try and grab these opportunities because you think, oh, it might lead to something else. But
Exactly.
it's quite nice that you can obviously now have that choice. But that's just a sensible decision, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess that's also you've got to get this band together, but you've also got to travel,
Yeah.
and then you've also got to spend all this time. And like you say, that again perhaps takes away from the creativity of making remixes, mega mixes, or whatever you're going to be doing, or the inspiration for new albums, isn't it? So that's another part of it.
It's like because we do so many gigs, it is very time consuming. I would say probably half of the year we're never at home. Do you know what I mean? That's how many gigs that we do. It's crazy. You do have to pick which ones you want to do. Do you know what I mean? And which are the best pays.
Yeah,
It,
exactly.
it
Well,
is about
exactly.
money, but when you run a business, it is about money as well. And it took me a long time from when I was young to actually even talk about money to anybody in the business. I thought it was a rude thing to approach people and talk about money, and it's not. It's just common sense. You know what I mean? You just got to be careful the way you do, the way you have the conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Guess it's festivals, bars, clubs, or whatever. Perhaps knowing that artists are not going to talk to each other about fees and all the rest of it, that perhaps helps keep some of those fees down. I guess
Yeah.
if you know that someone's getting X, then you can go in and say, well, that person's getting this. Give me this. But it's
The
very
difficult
difficult.
thing I think that's happening now, and it's been happening a fair few years now. Like years ago, all clubs and bars had their own DJ equipment. It was just a thing. They had to have Technics and then CGJs and then a mixer that worked. You know what I mean? Hopefully, you'd turn up with your records, or your CDs, or your pens, or whatever you had, and you would do the job, and you'd get paid 100, 200 quid, 300 if you were lucky. That was a night shift. You know what I mean? 7 hours, whatever it was. But now they want DJs to turn up, bring everything with them, speakers as well, all of your stuff, set it all up, and bang, do the show and take it all away. Do you know what I mean? And pay you 50 quid or 3 free whiskeys. That's it. It's just
Yeah,
like, nah. But there's always going to be some kids who are going to do it, and
yeah,
and that's the problem is they're lowering the bar, and sometimes these kids, I'm not necessarily summarising here, but they might not be very experienced, and they go in there and they put it on full volume at 6 o'clock. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh god, and you get what you pay for. That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah. I guess it's harder, certainly here in the UK. There's less and less venues for a start. There's then less and less that have vinyl decks, like you say. I mean, there's very few bars that have. There's a few in Brighton that we sort of play at and stuff, and a few other places. But a lot of the time, you have to bring on your own equipment, and that's the sort of rod we've made for our own backs by playing vinyl, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean that's fine.
Yeah,
If you're going to be a specialized DJ playing vinyl, and they don't have turntables, then you're probably going to have to take some along, or get someone who lives near there to bring some along and pay them. Do
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like that's part of the cost. I mean, most of the times when I used to turn up, the turntables would be like underneath the CDJs, and they'd be just on top of them. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Or they'd
yeah,
be
yeah,
like a crate of beer on top of the turntables.
Yeah. In the old days, there'd be vinyl decks, but places like you talked about Germany, we did some events in Hamburg, and I was quite surprised there that quite a lot of the old venues that have been there from like the 1950s, whatever, they've still got vinyl decks. It's still
Yeah.
quite a big, thriving vinyl community over there.
I saw the techno scene, the original techno scene. It was always vinyl, like always, and it's still alive in Germany. And I presume it still is now, as lively as it was. Because I remember all the record shops there was a hell of a lot of techno vinyl, like tons of it, which didn't interest me. Do you know what I mean? But I was always amazed by that scene that they had going on. It was huge.
We'll talk about a couple more things, and then I think we might have to call it a day. But we met obviously in Cambridge, and you are back in Cambridge, and hot off the press. I've been working on this today. So Whoosh presents a pop-up party in probably the most unique venue, Orleans After Dark. We love 45s and heavy soul. Funk the Courtroom. So this is an old courtroom that is in the Guildhall in Cambridge, and Yvette had told me about this place, and I was like, okay, that sounds really interesting. It's happening. Done a few events there, but nothing like this. And obviously you're headlining, so again, you're going to be playing 45s.
I'm looking forward to this one. I hope I don't get sent down though.
Well, at one point I did think about having your logo and then maybe making you like a judge or something like that, sitting at the top with a big hammer.
The hammer, yeah. I'm going to have
maybe
to start my set with the court is in session.
yeah, maybe for the next one. But yeah, you came down for our Cambridge event. That was our sort of second one-day thing we'd done. And again, we had a conversation there. It was okay. It was busy. It's always difficult to get people these days. But I think you need a unique venue, and it's coming back to let's make a party of it. Let's make something really interesting. So hopefully, we'll get people sort of coming back in. But obviously, you said you enjoy 45 sets. They're a lot of fun, aren't they?
Yeah, because you can like spin through a lot of records very fast. You're very live, you know what I mean, while you're doing it. It's like all your senses are on full. Do you know what I mean?
Is that part of the reason that you put out some of these sort of mega mix where you've got like all the tribe samples together and those sort of things? Is that because those come out on 45s, don't they?
Yeah, cut and paste something that blew me away while I was a kid. Like totally Steinsky and the Mass Media, the first one I heard, I think, and then obviously the lessons, history, absolute masterpieces. But then I heard like Mantronics, King of the Beats, and then I heard like Mars. Even that's very cut and paste. Even years after that were cut and paste fundamentally, but not like necessarily in your face as rough as they were. Do you know what I mean? They were very well put together, and people like Format as well, like was hugely influenced from cut and paste. I mean, a lot of people were, you know what I mean? I love that art form. Absolutely love pause mixing. That was how I started making music. On this thing. Just happened to have it here. This is what I started on. This is what I used to pause mix on.
Wow.
Yeah. So this big button here, this one there is the pause, and you pause it in and out, and that was it. And if you let the tape slip, you'd hear it like, so you had to get it like spot on. So I'd spend like 12 hours working on 7 seconds. You know what I mean? And my dad would hear it and go, "Is that it?" So yeah, that's how I started. So cut and paste was a massive thing for me. But yeah, the tribe thing, that was like a challenge to myself. I started doing it, and then I started multi-layering the samples because there was so many samples that tribe have taken. I was like, well, I've only got 8 minutes because there's only 4 minutes aside on a 7-inch tops, really. So I've got 8 minutes to get all of these samples. There was 100 samples went into it, actually.
Wow.
I nearly lost my mind making it. I spent a year making that record. I gave up on it, and another friend heard it before I finished it and went, "You have to finish that." So if it wasn't for Bob Zilla hearing it, then I wouldn't have finished it and released it. So yeah.
Just to be clear, that's now that you'll be doing that on Cubase. You haven't been doing that on that
No.
cassette machine.
There is a pause mix that I did on SoundCloud. I'll send you a link to that later on.
Okay.
That I did back in the day. Then I did the main source one in a similar fashion, but that was easier. I say easier because that was taking all the samples from one album, predominantly one album, Breaking Atoms, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. And then the other cut and paste thing I did was the Della Smoove, all of the Della Soul well, the ones I liked anyway. It was the Della Smoove one I did first. That Shek Dog released that, and it got pulled, the original release. And then Kev released it on Dinked, on another label that he knows.
He knows of, yes. Another label that he knows of, yes. Rolling Adam is saying he loved your 80 Tranquil Quest, De La Soul, Main Source, Farside, Mega Super. What's up next? Is there anything up next?
Yeah, I've got a few things. I've got this new one. It's coming tomorrow. That's like a boogie rap thing. I managed remix Heavy D Curse. It's like a posse cut. It's got loads of MCs on, like Cool G Rap, Q-Tips on it, CL Smooth, Pete Rock, Heavy D, obviously, and a few others. Grand Pooba. And then the other side is a Cool G Rap track, which again is a boogie track. So it's like boogie funk. That's coming out on a 45. Then I've got another 45 coming out in a couple of months. Basically, I've took Snoop Dogg and Pharrell, Let's Get Blown, remade that over all of the separates, the multi-tracks of Slave. It was Steve Harrington. He was the drummer in Slave. So actually, that is a multi-track 7-inch, come to think of it.
Aha, we've got one. There you go, Rolling Adam.
More of a mashup thing, yeah. And then the other side of that is De La Soul with Slave as well. A nice little 45. And I've got 2 multi-tracks. One's just come out, Volume 8, which is Wilson Pickett. And then the new one that's coming out is Depeche Mode, Enjoy the Silence, which is all replayed rather than reworked. It's actually all replayed with real strings.
In terms of DJ gigs, while I find someone to raid, have you got some stuff coming up in the next few weeks?
DJing in Darlington, a disco night with Mojax. I'm doing something in Marseille with Selector the Punisher. Yeah, and then obviously the Cambridge thing. There's a couple of bits. I don't tend to DJ much anymore, like I used to, because we're always out with the live band. We go back on tour with Smoove Turrell in February, and then we're out for like 3 months. So I've got all of that as well. And those tour dates are on our website, smooveturrell.com. And then we do our radio show every other week or whenever we can, which is Northern Call Experience. Me and John do the show, and it's like serious music and stupid crack. That's basically it.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I know obviously you're a busy man. Great to meet you in person when we did Cambridge, and I hope you're going to have another amazing show. Thanks everyone for joining us, and if you can make it down to Cambridge, do so. Come down.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.